Let me ask you something before we dive in. Think about one person right now, just one. Maybe it's someone you see every day, at work, at school, at the coffee shop on the corner where you always seem to arrive at the same time. Maybe it's someone you've known for years, someone you've laughed with 100 times, someone whose name pops into your head at the quietest moments of your day when there's nothing else to distract you from your own thoughts. Got that person? Good. Hold on to that thought, because by the time we finish today, you are going to understand something about that relationship and possibly about yourself that you may have been refusing to see clearly for a very long time. Here's the thing about human attraction. It's almost never loud. It's almost never the dramatic, cinematic moment where two people lock eyes across a crowded room and the world slows down and everything becomes perfectly obvious. That's a story we tell ourselves. That's the version we see in movies and read about in novels. But real attraction, the kind that actually means something, the kind that has staying power, the kind that keeps you up at night wondering and second-guessing and replaying conversations in your head, that kind of attraction is almost always quiet. It's almost always buried underneath everyday behavior. It's woven into the tiny, almost invisible details of how two people interact when they think no one is paying attention, or when they don't even realize they're doing it themselves. And that's exactly what makes it so confusing. You ever catch yourself staring at someone a little longer than you intended to, and then immediately looking away the moment they glanced back? You ever notice that your voice sounds different around a specific person? Lighter, maybe, or more careful, or trying just a tiny bit harder to be funny. Have you ever walked into a room and found yourself instantly aware of exactly where that one person is standing, even before you consciously looked for them? If you answered yes to any of that, welcome, you're human, and you are absolutely in the right place. Because today we are going to walk through 30, scientifically grounded, psychologically backed, real-world signs that two people are secretly attracted to each other, even when neither of them has said a single word about it. These aren't guesses. These aren't random observations from some random corner of the internet. These are rooted in decades of research from behavioral psychology, social neuroscience, evolutionary biology, and relationship science. These are the patterns that psychologists and researchers have studied in labs, documented in peer-reviewed journals, and observed in human beings across cultures and continents. And the reason we're going through all 30 of them is this. Most people only know 2 or 3 of these signs, and because they only know 2 or 3, they miss the full picture. They dismiss individual signals as coincidences. They talk themselves out of something real. They wait too long. They say nothing. And then one day, years later, they find out that the feeling was completely mutual all along, and they missed it. That's not going to be you. Not today. So get comfortable, get settled, and let's start from the very beginning. The body never lies. Signs 1 through 8. What your physical behavior reveals before your mind catches up. Sign number 1, unconscious mirroring. Let's start with perhaps the most powerful and most overlooked sign on this entire list, mirroring, also called behavioral synchrony by researchers. This is the unconscious tendency to copy or reflect the body language, gestures, posture, speech patterns, and even breathing rhythms of another person. And notice I said unconscious. That's the key word here. Because when people deliberately try to mirror someone to seem more likable, which is a technique some sales training and social coaching programs actually teach, it comes across as awkward, stilted, and a little bit creepy. But when it happens naturally, when it happens without either person intending it or even being aware of it, it is one of the most reliable indicators of genuine attraction and emotional connection that behavioral science has ever documented. Here's what it looks like in practice. You lean back in your chair. A moment later, almost as if responding to a silent cue, they lean back in theirs. You cross your arms, A few seconds pass. They cross their arms. You start talking with your hands when you get excited about something. Suddenly they're more animated with their hands too. You slow down your speaking pace. Their pace slows down to match. You laugh. They're already smiling before the punchline fully lands. Why does this happen? It goes back to something called mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing the same action. These neurons are thought to be the neurological foundation of empathy, and they're also deeply connected to social bonding and attraction. When we are genuinely interested in another person, when our brain has marked them as significant, as someone worth paying attention to, our mirror neuron system becomes hyperactive around them. We start to literally sync up with them at a neurological level. Researcher René Proyer at Martin Luther University found that the more attracted two people are to each other, the more synchronized their movements become over time. And other studies in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology found that people who were mirrored by a conversation partner rated the interaction as more enjoyable, felt a stronger connection, and in some cases felt more physically attracted to the person mirroring them, even when they couldn't consciously identify why. So the next time you're with that person, pay attention, not just to what you're doing, but to whether there's a rhythm forming between the two of you, a physical dialogue that's happening underneath the actual words. If there is, that rhythm means something. Sign number 2, prolonged eye contact, and the specific look that follows. There's eye contact, and then there's the kind of eye contact we're talking about here. Normal conversational eye contact lasts somewhere between 3 and 5 seconds before one or both people naturally look away. This is comfortable. This is socially appropriate. This is what we do with colleagues, acquaintances, strangers on public transit when we're trying not to be weird. But when two people are attracted to each other, even when they haven't admitted it, even when they're actively trying to pretend the attraction isn't there, the eye contact changes. It gets longer. It gets softer. There are these moments where the conversation keeps going, but something else is happening in the space between the words, something that only exists in the eye contact itself. And then, this is the part that really matters. There's the look that comes after. You've probably experienced this. The conversation ends, or someone else interrupts, or there's some external reason the moment has to conclude. But before they look away, there's this half second where their eyes linger just a beat longer than they need to. Just long enough to communicate something that hasn't been said out loud. And then they look away, often with a slight smile they may or may not be aware of. Psychologist Arthur Aaron at Stony Brook University conducted research that became famous in the context of emotional intimacy. His studies showed that sustained mutual eye contact between strangers for approximately 4 minutes could generate feelings of deep connection and, in some cases, romantic attraction. His work suggested that the eyes are not just windows to the soul in the poetic sense. They are literally a vehicle for emotional transmission at a neurological level. In attraction contexts, researchers have also found a specific pattern called the triangular gaze, where a person looks from one eye to the other eye, and then briefly down to the mouth, then back up to the eyes. This pattern, often happening in a fraction of a second, is almost exclusively associated with romantic interest. It's the brain's way of processing someone as a potential romantic partner rather than just a social contact. If you notice that someone holds eye contact with you just a little bit longer than everyone else does, if you feel like they're actually seeing you rather than just looking in your direction, that's not nothing. That's your nervous systems talking to each other. Sign number 3, physical proximity and the closeness creep. Here's a term I want you to remember: closeness creep. This is what happens when two people who are secretly attracted to each other gradually, incrementally, and almost imperceptibly begin to reduce the physical distance between them during interactions. without either of them consciously deciding to do so. Social psychologist Edward Hall developed the concept of proxemics, the study of how humans use physical space in social interactions. His research established that we have distinct comfort zones for different types of relationships. The intimate zone, roughly 0 to 18 inches from our body, is reserved for people we trust deeply, feel safe with, or are romantically involved with. The personal zone, 18 inches to about 4 feet, is for close friends and people we like. Beyond that is social and public space. Here's the thing. When we're attracted to someone, our body starts trying to move into their intimate zone. Not aggressively, not in a way that would register as overtly inappropriate, but incrementally, gradually. We find reasons to lean a little closer. We stand slightly nearer during group conversations. When we're sitting across from each other and both reach for something at the same time, we don't pull back quite as quickly as we would with someone we have no interest in. And critically, if the attraction is mutual, the other person doesn't move away. They may actually close the distance from their side, meeting you halfway without either of you discussing or even noticing the negotiation that's happening. Watch for this. Notice where you and this person physically end up relative to each other in group settings. Notice whether, over the course of a long conversation, the distance between you has changed since the conversation started. Notice whether you feel comfortable at a distance from this person that would feel too close with most other people. Proximity is the body asking a question, and staying close or getting closer is the body answering. Sign number 4, the involuntary smile, especially the real one. Not all smiles are created equal. In fact, psychologists have identified somewhere between 19 and 21 distinct types of human smiles, and only a few of them are genuine expressions of happiness or delight. The one you want to pay attention to is called the Duchenne smile, named after the 19th century French neurologist Guillaume Duchenne, who first documented it. This is the smile that involves not just the muscles around the mouth, but also the muscles around the eyes. Specifically the orbicularis oculi, the muscle that creates those small crinkles at the outer corners of the eyes, sometimes called crow's feet or laugh lines. Here's why this matters. The muscle around the eyes, the orbicularis oculi, cannot be voluntarily controlled by most people. We can force our mouths into a smile shape. We do it all the time in photos, in professional settings, in social situations where politeness requires us to appear cheerful whether we feel it or not. But the eye muscles, those only engage when the smile is real, when the happiness is genuine. So when someone gives you a Duchenne smile, when their entire face lights up, when the corners of their eyes crinkle, when there's warmth in their eyes and not just a curvature in their lips, that smile is telling you the truth about how they feel. But there's another smile to watch for in the context of attraction specifically. Researchers call it the anticipatory smile, or what some lay observers describe as the court smile. This is the smile that appears before the person is quite ready for it. The smile that breaks across someone's face when they first see you walk into the room, before their social awareness kicks in and they compose themselves. Or the smile that appears after a shared joke and lingers a beat longer than it should, like they're savoring the moment. If someone smiles differently around you than they do around other people, if you can feel the difference even if you can't quite articulate it, that difference is real. Your nervous system is picking up on something your logical mind might be working very hard to explain away. Sign number 5, preening and appearance adjustment. This one is almost comically consistent across both men and women, across cultures, across age groups. When someone is attracted to another person, they will almost automatically begin adjusting their appearance the moment that person enters their awareness. And often, they have absolutely no idea they're doing it. A woman runs a hand through her hair. A man straightens his collar or checks his shirt. Someone smooths down their clothing. Shoes get mentally noted, breath gets quietly checked, posture gets subtly straightened. These small, reflexive acts of self-grooming are what evolutionary psychologists call preening behaviors, and they serve the same function in humans that elaborate displays serve in the animal kingdom. They're a signal, often unconscious, that this is someone worth presenting our best self to. Evolutionary psychologist Geoffrey Miller has written extensively about how many human appearance and behavior signals function as what he calls fitness displays, unconscious demonstrations of our best qualities designed to attract potential partners. And while we're obviously operating in a far more complex social context than our evolutionary ancestors, the underlying wiring is still very much active. But here's the detail that makes this sign particularly interesting in the context of secret mutual attraction. The preening doesn't just happen before or during the interaction, it often happens in anticipation. People who secretly like someone will find themselves paying more attention to how they look on days they know they might see that person. They'll reconsider an outfit. They'll be more attentive to their overall appearance in ways that have nothing to do with vanity and everything to do with the subconscious desire to be found attractive by this specific individual. If you've ever found yourself putting in just a little extra effort on days, you know you'll see a particular person. If you've ever caught yourself checking how you look right before they might appear, you already know exactly what this sign feels like from the inside. Sign number 6, subtle touch and touch reciprocation. Touch is one of the most intimate forms of human communication, and in the context of secret mutual attraction, it often operates just below the threshold of what either person allows themselves to consciously acknowledge. Psychologist Tiffany Field, who directs the Touch Research Institute at the University of Miami School of Medicine, has spent decades documenting the psychological and physiological effects of human touch. Her research, along with that of many other scientists, has established clearly that touch communicates emotional meaning that words often can't capture, and that people who are attracted to each other tend to touch more frequently in more varied ways, and with greater intimacy, even in innocent forms of touch, than people who feel neutral toward each other. In the context of secret attraction, this often manifests as what researchers call incidental touch, touching that appears to have a practical or conversational justification, but is subtly more than that. A hand briefly placed on a forearm while making a point, a shoulder tap that lingers slightly longer than necessary, the accidental brushing of hands when passing something between each other, a gentle touch on the back when guiding someone through a doorway. These moments often have the electrical quality of meaning far more than their surface appearance suggests. And the reciprocation is equally important. When someone allows touch that they would normally find intrusive from another person, when they lean into contact rather than away from it, when they respond to a brief touch by staying close rather than creating distance, that response is communicating something significant. Pay attention not just to whether touch happens, but to how both parties respond to it. The response to touch is often even more revealing than the touch itself. Sign number 7. Nervous fidgeting and self-soothing behaviors. Here's a counterintuitive one. When we like someone, we often become slightly worse at being our normal selves around them, and the physical manifestation of this is fidgeting. Nervous energy that has nowhere to go has to go somewhere, so it goes into the body. It becomes the tapping foot, the repeatedly adjusted bracelet, the phone that keeps getting picked up and put down, the hair that keeps getting twirled or tucked, the fingers that keep finding ways to be busy. These self-soothing behaviors, technically called self-touching behaviors in the body language literature, are the physical signature of an elevated emotional state that we're working to manage. And the specific emotional state that causes this kind of fidgeting in adult social interactions is almost always either anxiety or excitement. And in the context of attraction, it's usually both simultaneously. The technical term is limerence anxiety. the specific flavor of nervousness that comes with being around someone you care deeply about impressing, someone whose opinion of you matters more than most people's, someone whose presence in your life you want but cannot fully control. Researcher Deborah Gruenfeld at Stanford Graduate School of Business has studied how people's physical behavior changes in the presence of someone they find impressive or attractive, and the findings consistently show an increase in self-conscious physical behavior, adjustments, movements, a higher baseline level of physical activity. Here's how to use this sign. If someone is notably more physically settled and calm with everyone else, but becomes noticeably fidgety, animated, or restless around you specifically, that contrast is the sign. Not the fidgeting in isolation, but the fact that you bring it out in someone who doesn't normally display it. Sign number 8. Blushing and physiological response. This one is almost embarrassingly honest, which is exactly why it matters. Blushing, the involuntary reddening of the face, neck, and sometimes chest and ears, is caused by the dilation of small blood vessels near the surface of the skin, triggered by the sympathetic nervous system during moments of emotional arousal. And here's the critical word: involuntary. You cannot fake a blush. You cannot prevent a blush. When your nervous system fires in response to an emotionally significant stimulus, which a person you're attracted to absolutely qualifies as, the blood vessels respond and the color follows, and there is nothing your conscious will can do about it. Research by psychologist Ray Crozier at Cardiff University has shown that blushing is a deeply social phenomenon specifically connected to how we feel about being perceived by others. We blush when we're embarrassed, yes, but we also blush when we're caught caring about something. When our attention is drawn to something we'd rather keep private. When our feelings are closer to the surface than we intended. So when someone blushes around you, when they flush slightly when you compliment them, when color rises in their face during a particular conversation, when they seem physically warmer in your presence, their body is announcing something their words might be working very hard to conceal. Similarly, watch for other involuntary physiological signals: slightly dilated pupils. The eyes literally widen to take in more of someone you find attractive. This is an adrenaline response. Changes in voice, which we'll get to more specifically later, and changes in breathing pace. These physiological responses are the body's testimony, and unlike almost everything else a person can do or say, testimony from the body is almost never perjury. The way they talk to you. Signs 9 through 16. Vocal and verbal cues that reveal more than words. Sign number 9. The voice change. If you've ever noticed that someone's voice sounds different around you than it does around other people, if there's something softer, warmer, or more careful in the way they speak to you specifically, you have already observed one of the most consistent and well-documented signs of attraction in the behavioral science literature. Research published in the Journal of Nonverbal Behavior has shown that people unconsciously modify their voices when speaking to someone they're attracted to. The specific changes vary by individual and by context, but common patterns include a slight lowering of pitch, which evolutionary psychologists link to the desire to seem more mature and sexually viable, a slowing of speaking pace, a gentler or more melodic tone, and an increase in what linguists call vocal warmth, the quality that makes a voice feel inviting rather than neutral. Interestingly, some research suggests that women's voices tend to shift to a slightly higher pitch around someone they find attractive, while men's voices often deepen. But perhaps more revealing than the direction of the change is the mere fact that it happens at all, and that it happens specifically and selectively with one person and not with others. If you want to test this with someone, pay attention to how they sound on the phone or in a group setting where they're speaking to multiple people. Then notice whether their voice quality shifts when the conversation turns to you directly. The shift may be subtle, but once you know to listen for it, it becomes nearly impossible to unhear. Sign number 10, remembering the small details. This is one of the signs that matters most, and also one of the most commonly missed because it looks like simple consideration rather than attraction. Think about what your working memory actually does. Your brain is receiving an absolutely overwhelming amount of sensory and informational input every single moment of every day. To cope with this, your brain has sophisticated filtering systems that decide what information gets encoded into memory and what gets discarded. The things that get encoded, the things that actually stick, are the things your brain has flagged as important or emotionally meaningful. So when someone remembers the small things you've said, not the major life events, not the obvious stuff, but the small things, the name of the book you mentioned in passing 3 weeks ago, the fact that you prefer your coffee a specific way, the thing you said about your childhood that you mentioned once and never brought up again, the small frustration you expressed about something at work that they bring up later to ask how it resolved. That's not an accident. That's your brain flagging someone as important enough to retain information about. Research by social psychologist Arthur Aaron has shown that when we're in states of attraction or emotional engagement with another person, our memory for details related to that person becomes significantly sharper. The brain essentially turns up its encoding efficiency for information about people it has marked as romantically or emotionally significant. And when someone remembers something small that you said, and then brings it back up at a later time, demonstrating that they were paying attention, that they held on to what you shared, the implicit message is powerful. You matter enough for me to remember. Not the big stuff that anyone would remember, but the small stuff that only matters if someone was truly listening. Sign number 11, teasing and playful banter with a specific quality. Teasing, when done right, is one of the most distinctly human forms of flirtation. And, when done right, is the crucial qualifier here, because there are many different kinds of teasing, and only one specific type belongs on this list. The teasing that signals attraction is warm, playful, and subtly exclusive. It's teasing that creates an inside world between two people. It's the gentle ribbing about something only they would know or understand. It's the nickname that only this one person uses. It's the running joke that has been developing across multiple conversations and is completely opaque to anyone outside the relationship. This is distinct from general banter, which can happen with anyone, from sarcasm, which can be distancing, and from criticism disguised as humor, which is something else entirely. The specific quality of attraction-based teasing is that it's constructed from shared knowledge and shared history, however short that history might be, and it creates a sense of a private world. Developmental psychologist Dr. Michael Tomasello at the Max Planck Institute has written about shared intentionality, the human capacity to create joint attention, joint knowledge, and shared frameworks for understanding the world. In the context of two adults who are attracted to each other, playful teasing that draws on shared reference points is essentially an expression of this, a way of saying, "We have a world that belongs only to us, and I like living in it." So if someone teases you in a way that could only come from paying close attention to who you specifically are, if the teasing feels intimate rather than general, that specificity is the attraction talking. Sign number 12, finding your opinions more interesting than other people's. Pay attention to this one carefully because it's subtle. When someone is attracted to you, your opinions start to carry more weight with them than they objectively should. Not necessarily because your opinions are better or more informed, but because your brain assigns greater significance to information from people who matter to us emotionally. This shows up in specific, observable ways. They'll ask for your opinion in situations where they might not ask anyone else. They'll bring up your perspective in conversations with other people. Someone I know said something interesting about this. They'll engage with your viewpoint with genuine curiosity, even when they disagree, rather than dismissing it or moving past it quickly. They'll return to things you've said, turn them over, consider them at length. Social psychologist Robert Cialdini's work on influence and liking has documented extensively that we are more easily persuaded by, more interested in, and more likely to remember the contributions of people we like. And in the context of romantic attraction, this effect is amplified. The views of someone we're attracted to can actually temporarily reorganize how we think about a topic. But here's the detail that makes this sign especially meaningful. It's not just that they find your opinions interesting, it's the contrast. Watch how they engage with other people's opinions versus yours. If there's a meaningful difference in the depth of their engagement, in the quality of their attention, in the interest they bring to what you specifically think, that difference is not about the quality of your ideas. It's about the quality of their feelings. Sign number 13, asking questions that go deeper than the surface. There's a specific conversational behavior that almost universally accompanies genuine attraction, and it's this: asking questions that go one level deeper than social norms require. Normal social conversation is relatively shallow. How was your weekend? Good, pretty quiet. Yours? Same. And everyone moves on. This level of engagement is functional but not particularly connective. We're sharing information without actually sharing ourselves. But when someone is attracted to another person, they want to know more, not just the surface-level facts, but the meaning behind the facts. Not just what happened, but how the person felt about it. Not just what they think, but why they think it. Not just what they do, but what they love about it and what frustrates them about it and what it means to who they are. So if the people around you ask, "How was your weekend?" but this one specific person asks, "How was your weekend?" and then when you answer, actually follows up, "Wait, you said the hike was harder than you expected. What was that like?" Or, "I didn't know you had a sister. Are you too close?" Or, "You mentioned that work thing before and I've been wondering how that turned out." That's not just being a good conversationalist. That's attraction expressing itself as curiosity. Psychologist Arthur Aaron developed what became known as the 36 questions study, which showed that asking progressively deeper and more personal questions between two people generated measurable increases in feelings of closeness and, in some cases, attraction. The insight embedded in this research is that deep curiosity about another person and attraction to another person are not just correlated, they are mutually reinforcing. Each one generates more of the other. When someone wants to know who you actually are, not the version of you that social etiquette requires you to present, but the actual person underneath, that's not idle curiosity, that's investment. And investment indicates caring. Sign number 14, laughter, especially at things that aren't that funny. This one is going to resonate with a lot of people because it's simultaneously very obvious and very easy to rationalize away. When two people are attracted to each other, everything gets funnier. Not because either of them is suddenly funnier, although they will both probably try harder to be, but because laughter is a social bonding mechanism that the brain deploys more generously toward people it cares about. Research by evolutionary psychologist Jeffrey Miller has proposed that humor functions as a fitness indicator in the context of attraction, a way of demonstrating cognitive flexibility, social intelligence, and the ability to generate pleasure in another person. And studies in evolutionary psychology have consistently found that both men and women rate a good sense of humor as one of the most attractive traits in a potential romantic partner. But here's the specific observation that belongs on this list. When someone is attracted to you, they laugh at things you say that are objectively, maybe only mildly amusing. Things that other people might respond to with a polite smile. This person finds genuinely funny, and you probably find yourself doing the same thing, finding their observation or joke or comment funnier than you'd normally find that type of humor. Research published in the journal Personal Relationships found that couples who laughed together more frequently reported higher levels of relationship satisfaction, and that the frequency and quality of shared laughter was a reliable predictor of relationship longevity. But even before the relationship is established, shared laughter serves as a test, a low-stakes way of checking whether two people's brains are compatible, whether their senses of humor align, whether being together feels good. If you're consistently finding someone funnier than everyone else finds them, and if they're laughing at your observations more readily than other people do, that's not a coincidence. Your brains are enjoying each other, and brains that enjoy each other tend to want more of that experience. Sign number 15, sudden shyness or uncharacteristic quietness. Here's one that surprises people when I bring it up, because we tend to associate attraction with increased confidence, increased charisma, increased talkativeness. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's exactly the opposite. For some people, and this is more common than most dating advice acknowledges, genuine attraction produces not boldness, but something closer to awe. A sudden awareness of how much this person's opinion matters, a hypersensitivity to how they're coming across, a momentary loss of the social fluency they normally have because the stakes feel too high for casual. If someone who is normally confident, articulate, and socially fluid becomes noticeably quieter, more careful with their words, more tentative or slightly awkward in your specific presence, that shift is enormously telling. It means that being around you activates something in them that they're not fully in control of. It means that your presence matters to them in a way that disrupts their normal operating mode. Dr. Helen Fisher, a biological anthropologist at Rutgers University who has spent decades studying the neuroscience of romantic love, has documented how the early stages of attraction can produce symptoms remarkably similar to anxiety, including intrusive thoughts, a sense of unpredictability, difficulty concentrating, and yes, sometimes a reduction in normal verbal fluency. So don't misread quietness as disinterest. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the person who goes the most quiet when you enter the room is the one who is the most aware of your presence. Sign number 16. Responding to your messages quickly but thoughtfully. In the contemporary context, this one has become one of the most universally discussed signs of attraction, and there's actually real psychology behind the observation, not just social media speculation. When someone is attracted to you, hearing from you produces a genuine neurochemical response. The notification of a message from you triggers a mild release of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward anticipation and pleasure. This means that your messages are genuinely more pleasurable to receive than most other messages, which means the motivation to respond is genuinely higher. But the quality of the response matters as much as the speed. What distinguishes attraction-driven messaging from mere politeness is the investment visible in the response itself. It's a reply that actually engages with what you said, rather than deflecting or providing a minimal answer. It's a message that asks a follow-up question, indicating they want the conversation to continue. It's a response that adds something, a related thought, a personal disclosure, a joke, rather than just acknowledging what you said and ending the thread. Psychologist Jeremy Osborne from Albion College has studied how digital communication patterns affect relationship development, and his research found that the perception of responsiveness, feeling that someone genuinely hears and engages with what you share, is one of the most significant factors in the development of both intimacy and romantic feelings. The fast response is the body telling you something. The thoughtful response is the mind confirming it. Behavioral patterns that speak volumes. Signs 17 through 23. actions and patterns that reveal hidden feelings. Sign number 17. Finding reasons to be around you. This is the most logistically obvious sign on the list, and yet it's remarkable how consistently people talk themselves out of seeing it clearly. When someone is attracted to you, they will find reasons to be in your proximity that don't explicitly announce their interest. They'll volunteer for the same project you're working on. They'll happen to be in the same area during break times. They'll suggest activities or outings in contexts where your paths might cross. They'll manufacture reasons to reach out, sending you an article they thought you might find interesting, asking for your opinion on something they could easily have figured out themselves, bringing up something they just happened to remember you mentioning. The psychology behind this is straightforward but profound. Psychologist Robert Zayonk documented what he called the mere exposure effect, the well-replicated finding that we tend to like things more the more we're exposed to them. People who are attracted to each other intuitively understand this at some level, even if they can't articulate it. More time together, more connection. And so the brain starts generating reasons for more time together, even when the conscious mind hasn't fully acknowledged why. But the specific detail to notice isn't just the increased presence, it's the pattern of it. Any one instance can be coincidence, but a consistent, repeated pattern of showing up in your world across multiple contexts and occasions is not coincidence. It's motivation, and motivation comes from somewhere. Sign number 18, jealousy, even when they have no official right to feel it. This one is uncomfortable for a lot of people to acknowledge, both to notice in others and to admit in themselves, but it belongs on this list because it's one of the most psychologically honest signals of hidden attraction. Jealousy at its core is the emotional response to a perceived threat, to something we feel we have a claim on, or wish we had a claim on. And that wish element is the key here. You cannot feel jealous about something you have no feelings about. The jealousy itself is the proof that feelings exist. So when someone who is supposedly just a friend shows a visible reaction, a slight tensing, a change in expression, a quiet withdrawal, a pointed change of subject, when you mention spending time with someone else, or when someone else flirts with you, or when you talk about a date you went on, or a person you've been seeing, that reaction is their feelings leaking through their control. They don't need to make a scene. They probably won't. People who are secretly attracted to someone and haven't admitted it are usually quite careful to manage their reactions. But the management is imperfect. There's usually a tell, a fraction of a second where the face shows something before the social mask is reapplied. Dr. Helen Fisher's neuroscience research on jealousy has shown that it activates many of the same neural pathways as physical pain. We feel jealousy most acutely about people we are most emotionally invested in. The presence of jealousy is, neurologically, the presence of investment. And investment is a form of love, even at its earliest stages. If you notice that a particular person seems subtly uncomfortable, slightly withdrawn, or uncharacteristically quiet when the topic of your romantic life comes up, that discomfort is telling you something they may not yet have found the courage to say directly. Sign number 19, supportiveness that goes beyond normal friendship. Here's a sign that often gets miscategorized as they're just a really good friend, and sometimes that's true. But there's a specific quality to the support that someone who secretly likes you provides that distinguishes it from ordinary friendship, and that quality is best described as personal investment. When someone secretly likes you, your setbacks feel personal to them. Your wins produce something that looks very close to pride, not the patronizing kind, but the kind that says, "I'm so glad you have this, you deserve it." They volunteer to help you with things before you ask. They remember to follow up on your difficult situations. They make themselves available at inconvenient times when you need someone. They advocate for you in conversations where you're not present. The distinction between this and normal friendship isn't the presence of supportiveness. Good friends are supportive. The distinction is the specificity, the consistency, and the emotional resonance of the support. It feels different to be on the receiving end of it, even if you can't immediately put into words why. Psychologist Mark Leary at Duke University has studied what he calls sociometer theory, the idea that our self-esteem functions as a monitor of our level of inclusion and acceptance by others. His research suggests that we are finely tuned to detect genuine interest from others, even when that interest hasn't been explicitly stated. We feel differently around people who genuinely care about our well-being versus people who are going through the social motions of support. If there's someone in your life whose support feels distinctly different, warmer, more attentive, more consistent, more emotionally engaged than what friendship alone would predict, pay attention to that feeling. Your sociometer is picking up a signal. Sign number 20, noticing changes in your appearance. When someone is paying close attention to you, the specific kind of attention that attraction generates, they begin to notice things about you that other people don't notice, including small changes in how you look. They notice you got a haircut before anyone else mentions it. They comment on a new item of clothing. They notice when you look tired and ask if everything is okay. They notice a small detail, a different style, a piece of jewelry you don't usually wear, that most people walk right past. This heightened observational attentiveness is a direct consequence of the way attraction focuses neural resources. When we're attracted to someone, our brain allocates more processing power to stimuli related to that person. We notice them in peripheral vision more readily. We detect small changes in their affect and energy. We develop what researchers sometimes call an attentional bias toward them, meaning they capture our attention more quickly and hold it more readily than other people. And when that attentional bias is operating, small changes in your appearance don't slip by undetected. They get noticed. And the person who is attracted to you will often feel a compulsion to mention the change, because mentioning it is a way of communicating the underlying message, I see you, not in the general way that everyone sees you, but specifically, personally, carefully. Sign number 21, protective behaviors, looking out for you without being asked. There's a category of behavior in attraction research sometimes called mate guarding, in its more extreme evolutionary form, but in its everyday, healthy expression, it shows up as protectiveness, a natural desire to look out for someone you care about, to ensure their safety and comfort, to interpose yourself between them and potential harm or discomfort. This might look like walking on the side of the sidewalk closer to traffic. It might look like making sure you got home safely by checking in after a late night. It might look like noticing when you seem uncomfortable in a social situation and finding a way to redirect the conversation or give you an out. It might look like speaking up for you in a group setting when someone says something unfair or dismissive about you. It might look like flagging something they thought you'd want to know about, a potential problem, a relevant piece of information, because looking out for your interests has become something they do automatically. Dr. John Gottman at the University of Washington, one of the most cited researchers in relationship science, has studied the behaviors that predict strong, enduring relationships and protective attentiveness. The tendency to consider a partner's well-being as part of one's own concern is one of the foundational patterns he identifies in couples with high relationship satisfaction. In the pre-relationship context, this protective care shows up before there's any official claim or commitment. It shows up because the feelings are real, even if they haven't been named yet. Sign number 22. Bringing you into conversations with others. Here's a sign that happens in group settings and is almost never analyzed for what it actually reveals. When someone likes you, really, genuinely likes you, they want other people to know you and to appreciate you. They want to share the experience of you with the rest of their world, and one of the ways this expresses itself in group settings is through the habit of bringing you into conversations. This might look like them physically orienting their body toward you when the group is talking, creating a visual invitation for you to contribute. It might look like them referencing things you've said or thought in group conversations. Actually, Usman had an interesting perspective on this. Tell them what you told me. It might look like them asking for your opinion specifically when the group is making a collective decision, drawing your voice into the conversation in a way that signals your opinion matters. This behavior serves multiple psychological functions simultaneously. It creates a bridge between you and their wider social world, an act of integration that matters a lot to people who are imagining a future with someone. It also subtly announces a kind of closeness. They know your thoughts well enough to reference them. They have enough confidence in your mind to put it on display in front of others. If someone consistently creates space for you in conversations they're having with others, if they seem to want you to be seen and heard in contexts beyond just your one-on-one interactions, that inclusion is an expression of something. Sign number 23. Treating you differently from other people. This one might be the single most important sign on the entire list because it contextualizes every other sign we've discussed. None of the individual behaviors on this list are necessarily meaningful in isolation. Eye contact, laughter, proximity, supportiveness. These can all be present in normal friendships, in professional relationships, in ordinary human connection. What makes them significant in the context of secret mutual attraction is the pattern and, crucially, the contrast. If someone mirrors everyone they talk to equally, the mirroring doesn't tell you much. If someone is equally supportive of everyone, the support is just their personality. If someone finds everyone equally funny, the laughter doesn't carry specific meaning. But if someone laughs more at your jokes than at anyone else's, if their voice changes specifically around you, if they remember the small things specifically about you, if the eye contact is specifically longer with you, if the proximity is specifically closer with you, if the protectiveness is specifically activated by your situation, if you specifically get more of their time, their attention, their energy, their curiosity, their care, that pattern of difference is the sign. Research by social psychologist Elaine Hatfield has extensively documented that in the early stages of attraction, people unconsciously treat the object of their attraction as a special category, allocating cognitive and emotional resources to them at a level that objectively doesn't match what the stated relationship, friend, colleague, acquaintance would normally justify. You being the exception to how they treat everyone else is not an accident. You are the exception because you are the exception to them. In their internal world, you already occupy a different category, and that categorization, whether they've admitted it or not, is what every other sign on this list flows from. The internal world, what's happening in their mind and yours. Signs 24 through 30. The deeper psychological signals. Sign number 24. You keep coming up in their conversations with others. This one requires information from a third party to fully observe, but it's worth including because it's one of the most honest indicators available. When someone is attracted to another person, that person tends to show up in their conversations. Frequently, sometimes relevantly, sometimes not. They'll mention your name when telling a story. They'll reference something you said. They'll bring you up as an example. They'll find excuses to talk about you to mutual friends or to people who don't know you at all. This happens because someone we're attracted to occupies a disproportionate amount of our mental real estate. When we're thinking about someone a lot, which attraction causes, those thoughts naturally start spilling into conversation. We don't always even notice we're doing it. We'll be talking about something completely unrelated and suddenly realize we've brought that person's name into it again. And the people around us notice this pattern long before we're willing to admit it ourselves. This is why mutual friends so often see it first. They're hearing the name come up repeatedly in conversations that have no objective reason to include it. They're watching someone's face change when a certain subject comes up. They have the outside view that the two people involved are too close and too invested to access clearly. If mutual friends in your social circle have teased you about someone or suggested without much basis that something is going on, or seem to know more than they should about your interactions with a specific person, consider where that intelligence might be coming from. They've been listening, and the person they've been listening to has been revealing more than they realize. Sign number 25, the future tense, including you in plans that haven't happened yet. Language is revealing, particularly the verb tenses we use when we're talking about the future. One of the most meaningful things someone can do when they're attracted to you is to unconsciously begin including you in their future, in how they talk about it, in how they plan for it, in what they assume about it. This might sound like, "You should come with me to that city sometime. There's this place you would love." It might be, "When the summer comes around, we should try that hiking trail you mentioned." It might be, "I'm going to that event next month. You should come." Or even subtler, "When I do this thing I've been planning, you'd be really good at the part where..." None of these are declarations of love. None of them require the speaker to be aware of what they're doing. But what they share is this: an assumption of your future presence, a cognitive default in which you are included in the experiences they're imagining, a world in which you are part of the picture. Psychologist Daniel Gilbert at Harvard, who studies prospective memory and future thinking, has noted that how we populate our imagined futures says a great deal about who and what we value in the present. We imagine futures with the people and things that matter most to us. When someone starts including you in their imagined futures, even casually, even incidentally, it's because some part of their mind has placed you in the category of people I want to be around long term. That's not a small thing. That's actually quite a large thing dressed up in casual conversational language. Sign number 26. Vulnerability moments. Sharing things they don't usually share. Vulnerability in the context of attraction is fascinating because it operates in both directions simultaneously. Being attracted to someone makes you want to let them in, to share things you normally protect, to reveal parts of yourself you normally keep private. And at the same time, being genuinely seen and known by another person deepens attraction. Psychologist Brené Brown's extensive research on vulnerability has shown that the willingness to be vulnerable is one of the primary pathways through which humans form deep, meaningful connections. And in the context of secret attraction, vulnerability often shows up as the small, somewhat unguarded moment, the flash of honesty that goes a little further than usual, the story that reveals something personal, the admission of a fear or a hope or a difficulty that they don't share with just anyone. If someone tells you something they specify they don't usually tell people, if they share something personal and then say, "I don't know why I'm telling you this," or "I never usually talk about this," or "You're probably the only person I've told," that's not casual. That's trust in a very particular form. That's your presence making it feel safe to be real. And the "I don't know why I'm telling you this" moment is especially significant, because their conscious mind is actually expressing genuine confusion. They do not have a fully articulate explanation for the impulse to open up to you. What they haven't yet fully acknowledged is that the explanation is simple. They like you. They trust you. They want you to know them. Sign number 27, the mental movie. They've already imagined what if. This one is internal, so it's harder to observe directly in someone else. But you can sometimes catch echoes of it in how they respond to certain conversational openings. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll recognize it immediately from your own experience. When we are attracted to someone, we run mental simulations. We imagine scenarios. We play out the what-if conversations. What would happen if I told them? What would they say? What would it be like if we were actually together? We notice details about them in our real interactions, and then find those details populating our daydreams later. We imagine how they'd react to different situations. We picture them in contexts they haven't been part of yet. At a place we love, meeting our friends, laughing at something they haven't heard yet. This mental simulation is not idle fantasy. It's actually a form of cognitive processing, the mind trying to evaluate compatibility, predict emotional outcomes, and determine the risk profile of pursuing a real connection. And it leaves traces. It shows up in the way someone responds to hypothetical questions, especially hypotheticals that subtly probe the possibility of closeness. It shows up in the knowing way they respond when a mutual friend teases them about you. It shows up in the fact that they have opinions about things you've never explicitly discussed, because they've thought about it already in the quiet of their own imagination. If someone seems to have already thought about you in contexts you've never directly occupied together, if they seem to know more about how they'd want things to be between you than the actual history of your interactions would justify, it's because the conversations and scenarios have already been happening, just not out loud, not yet. Sign number 28, the energy shift. When you walk into a room, this one is something other people often notice before the two people involved do. When someone who is secretly attracted to you enters a space you're already in, or when you enter a space they're in, there's an energy shift. Something changes in the atmosphere. Not dramatically, not in a way that anyone would be able to describe precisely, but it's there and it's perceptible. For the person doing the attracting, the shift is internal. A heightened alertness, a physical readiness, an increased awareness of their own presence and behavior. But the shift has external manifestations. They sit up straighter, they become slightly more animated, something in their expression opens up. For observers in the room, this shift often registers as a kind of magnetic quality. The two people seem more aware of each other than the situation requires. The energy between them has a different texture than it has with anyone else in the room. Social psychologist Elaine Hatfield, who has studied what she calls emotional contagion, has documented how our emotional states are highly permeable. We pick up on the emotional and physiological states of those around us, often unconsciously. When attraction is present between two people in a room, the increased energy and attention between them creates a field that others in the room can sense, even if they can't name what they're sensing. You've probably experienced being in a room where you could just tell that something was between two people before either of them said anything about it. That telling is a real perceptual event, and if people are sensing it between you and someone else, they're probably picking up on something real. Sign number 29, the discomfort of distance, missing them specifically. Most of us have had the experience of missing someone. But the specific quality of missing someone you're secretly attracted to has a distinct character, one that's worth examining because it reveals something important about the depth and nature of the feeling. Ordinary social missing is general and diffuse. You want to see your friends. You miss the energy of a group. You feel the absence of social connection. But missing someone you're attracted to is specific and focused. It's not their social function you're missing. It's them, their particular energy, their specific way of saying things, the way a room feels different when they're in it versus when they're not. The particular texture of conversations with them that conversations with other people don't replicate. The sound of their laugh, the things they would have said about something that happened that you're now experiencing without them. Dr. Helen Fisher's neuroscience research has shown that the early stages of attraction activate the brain's reward pathways, particularly the ventral tegmental area and the caudate nucleus, regions associated with the dopaminergic reward system. This means that interactions with the person we're attracted to become neurologically rewarding, which means that the absence of those interactions is neurologically experienced as a kind of deficit, an absence of reward that the brain notices and flags. In practical terms, this means that when we're attracted to someone, their absence is more notable than the absence of people we feel neutral about. We think about them specifically when something happens that we'd want to tell them. We notice when we're in places they've been. We find ourselves hoping in idle moments that we'll see them soon. If there's someone whose absence feels specifically different from other people's absences, if their not being there changes the quality of a situation in a way that no one else's absence would, that specificity of missing is telling you something very clear about where your heart is. Sign number 30, the moment of almost, and what comes after it. We've saved the most profound sign for last, and it's this: the moment where one of you almost said it, or almost crossed the line, or the moment came so close to being the moment, and then something pulled back. And the way things were between you after that, almost. You've probably experienced this. A conversation that got suddenly quiet in a particular way. A look that held a fraction of a second too long, and then both people looked away. A sentence that started going somewhere, and then redirected. A moment alone together where something was almost tangibly present in the air between you, and neither of you said it. And then one of you made a joke or suggested getting another drink or said something practical, and the moment dissolved. These near moments are profoundly meaningful for several reasons. First, they require both parties to be feeling something. Moments of almost don't happen with people who feel neutral toward each other. The magnetism, the charge, the suspended quality of those seconds, that's mutual. It's happening between both of you simultaneously, which is why both of you can feel it. Second, the way someone behaves after an almost moment is one of the most reliable indicators of the depth and seriousness of the feeling. If it was nothing, they would behave like nothing happened. But if there's a slight change, a new awareness, a subtle shift in how carefully they're holding themselves around you, a certain kind of charged normalcy that feels like it's working hard to be normal, that behavioral aftermath is the feeling continuing to express itself even after the explicit moment has passed. Researcher John Gottman, in his studies of what he calls turning points in relationship development, has noted that these moments of approach and retreat are not just common, they are essentially universal in the development of meaningful romantic connections. Very few people go from strangers or friends to explicitly in love without passing through a series of these charged almost moments that build, retreat, and rebuild, until finally the feeling becomes too substantial to contain. If you've had moments like this with someone, if you've been in that suspended quiet together and then both stepped back from it, the question isn't whether the feeling is there. The feeling is clearly there on both sides. The question is only what you're both going to do about it. The full picture. We've walked through 30 signs together. And if you've been reading this while thinking about a specific person, and I suspect many of you have, I want to take a moment to address you directly. Here's what I want you to understand before you walk away from this conversation. These 30 signs don't all need to be present simultaneously for attraction to be real. 5 of these signs, consistently present across multiple interactions, tells a clearer story than 25 signs present on one single occasion. What matters is the pattern over time, not the quantity on any given day. And here's the other thing I want to say clearly. The fact that someone shows all 30 of these signs doesn't automatically mean you should act on the attraction. Context matters, circumstances matter, timing matters, the other dimensions of your relationship and your lives matter. What these signs tell you is that the feeling is real, and that it's likely mutual. But what you do with that information requires the kind of wisdom and judgment that no list of psychology facts can provide. Only you can assess that. What these signs do give you, however, is the most important thing of all: clarity. Because so much of the suffering that comes with unacknowledged mutual attraction is not the feeling itself. The feeling, even when it's uncertain, even when it's complicated, has a kind of aliveness to it that most people wouldn't trade away. The suffering is the not knowing, the second guessing, the spending hours analyzing a 30-second interaction for evidence of what you're not sure is real, the going back and forth between maybe and probably not, and I think so but, and I'm probably imagining it. You're not imagining it. That's what psychology tells us. The specific, consistent, multi-channel pattern of behaviors we've discussed today, the mirroring, the eye contact, the proximity, the voice change, the remembered details, the laughter, the protectiveness, the vulnerability, the jealousy, the future tense planning, the energy shift, the almost moments. When these things are present together, consistently, specifically directed at one person, they are not coincidences, and they are not imagination. They are a coherent communication from one nervous system to another, a language that predates words, a truth that the body announces long before the mind is ready to confirm it. A deeper look, the science of why we hide it. Now, having gone through all 30 signs, I want to spend some time on the question that underlies everything we've discussed. Why do we hide it? Why, when the attraction is clearly present and clearly mutual, do two people spend weeks, months, sometimes years in this state of coded communication and plausibly deniable signals? Why don't we just say it? The answer is multi-layered and deeply human. The first layer is fear of rejection, and not just any fear of rejection, the specific, particular fear of losing what already exists if the feeling turns out not to be mutual. When someone is already important to you, when you already look forward to seeing them, already feel better in their presence, already have something real, even if unnamed, the prospect of risking that by making the feeling explicit is genuinely terrifying. The current state, uncertain and undefined as it is, feels safer than the potential collapse of it, so we say nothing, and we keep looking for more signs. The second layer is what psychologists call pluralistic ignorance, the phenomenon where multiple people in a group all privately disagree with or feel differently from the apparent group consensus. But because no one expresses their private view, each individual assumes that everyone else actually agrees with the consensus and that they alone are the exception. In the context of mutual attraction, this plays out something like this. Both people feel the attraction, but because neither person has expressed it, each person assumes that the other doesn't feel it, or at least is less certain than they are. So each person continues to act within the bounds of what the relationship currently is, friend, colleague, acquaintance, because they believe the other person is actually comfortable in that definition, and so they both sit inside a mutual misunderstanding, feeling something real, saying nothing, and waiting for the other person to move first. The tragedy of pluralistic ignorance in the context of attraction is that both people are right about the feeling and wrong about the situation. Both people sense that something is there. Both people are, in fact, correct that something is there. But both people are operating from an assumption that the other person doesn't share the feeling. That is incorrect. And because the assumption is never tested, the misunderstanding never resolves. The third layer is what researcher Brené Brown would frame as the fear of vulnerability itself. Not just the specific fear of this specific rejection, but a deeper terror of being truly seen wanting something, of having your desire on display, of being the one who wanted something and didn't get it, of having reached out your hand and had it not taken. For many people, The concealed attraction is not just about managing the other person's response. It's about managing their own sense of dignity and self-protection. If you never say it, you never officially failed. The dream stays technically alive. The possibility, however unlikely, remains uncollapsed. Understanding why we hide these feelings doesn't make the hiding wrong. It makes it deeply human. Every sign on that list of 30 exists precisely because two people are trying to communicate something real without quite having the courage or the clarity to communicate it directly. Every mirrored gesture and held gaze and remembered small detail is a love letter in a language just subtle enough that if the letter were received badly, it could technically be denied. But here's what psychology also tells us, with great consistency across decades of research. The things that matter most in human life are the things we take genuine risks for. Relationships that begin with courage, with someone finally deciding that the cost of silence is higher than the risk of honesty, tend to have a different quality than relationships that drift into existence through the gradual erosion of caution. Both paths can lead to genuine love, but the path that begins with someone choosing to be vulnerable, choosing to be seen, choosing to say the thing that was always true, that path tends to be remembered with a specific kind of pride and tenderness that the other path rarely produces. What to do with this knowledge? So let's talk practically for a moment. You've read through 30 signs. You've probably been applying them consciously or otherwise to your situation the entire time. And now you're at the end, and you're sitting with whatever clarity or confirmation or additional confusion this has produced. What do you actually do with it? Here's my honest assessment. If you're reading this to understand someone else's feelings, use what you've learned to observe more carefully rather than to reach immediate conclusions. The best use of this information is not to build a case, to stack up evidence until you're certain enough to act. The best use is to pay attention more intentionally to the full picture of how someone behaves around you over time, across multiple contexts. Single data points mislead. Patterns across time and context are much more reliable. Give yourself the gift of patient observation before you decide what you know. And remember, people are not puzzles to be solved. The person you're thinking about is having a complex inner experience that no external list can fully capture. What psychology can tell you is what certain patterns of behavior generally indicate. What it cannot tell you is everything about this specific person in this specific situation. Use this knowledge as a lens, not a verdict. If you're reading this to understand your own feelings, the 30 signs we've discussed are not just indicators of what someone else might feel. They are also a mirror. If you recognize many of these behaviors in yourself, if you see yourself doing the mirroring, the remembering of small details, the finding of reasons to be nearby, the holding of eye contact a beat longer than you need to, the protective attentiveness, then you already know something important about your own heart that you may have been too comfortable not examining. We often seek information about others as a way of deferring information about ourselves. It's easier to ask, does he like me? Or, does she feel it too? Than to sit with the more immediate and more vulnerable question, how do I feel and what does that mean I want to do? So alongside the question of what their behavior means, sit with the question of what your attention to their behavior means. The fact that you're reading a 15,000-word piece about signs of secret mutual attraction, the fact that you had a specific person in mind from the first paragraph, that's information too. If you think the feeling is mutual, first, take a breath. Mutual attraction is genuinely wonderful. It's also not a problem that needs to be immediately solved. Give yourself a moment to just be in it, to notice it, to appreciate it, to understand what it is before you start managing it. Then, when you're ready, consider the possibility that the most direct path forward is also available to you. Not a grand declaration, not a high-stakes revelation, just honesty. Simple, measured, human honesty. You don't have to announce your feelings like a proclamation. You can start smaller. A question. I've been thinking about us a lot and I'm curious if you've thought about it too. An admission. I really like spending time with you. An invitation. I'd like to see you more. Would you want to get dinner? These are not dramatic. They are simply the next step from a place of genuine connection. The research on relationship initiation, on who decides to make the first move and why and what happens when they do, consistently shows that the vast majority of people report being glad they were honest, even when the feeling turned out not to be mutual. The relief of honesty, the clarity it produces, the way it resolves the perpetual uncertainty. These outcomes are almost universally experienced as better than the ongoing limbo of secret wanting. And when the feeling is mutual, as if you've been tracking all 30 signs, it may well be, the relief and joy of finally saying the true thing, of finally being in the same conversation about the same reality, is one of the most profound experiences human beings have access to. Final reflections. What attraction is really telling you? Before we close, I want to offer one more perspective, one that goes a little beyond the specific signs we've discussed and toward something larger. Attraction is not random. It is not, as pop culture sometimes suggests, a mysterious and arbitrary lightning bolt that could strike anywhere at any time for no reason. The people we are drawn to tell us something about ourselves, about what we value, about what we're ready for, about the parts of ourselves we're reaching toward, about the kind of person we are and the kind of partnership our deepest self is capable of imagining. The research of Dr. Helen Fisher has identified what she calls love maps, internally held blueprints of what we find attractive, assembled from our childhood experiences, our formative relationships, our cultural context, and our own evolving sense of who we are. These love maps are remarkably specific and remarkably stable across adult life. When someone activates our attraction, when they fit the complex, layered, often unconscious template we carry for what we find compelling, it's not nothing. It's not just chemistry. It's the recognition of something our deeper self has been looking for. This doesn't mean every attraction is destined to become a relationship. It doesn't mean every strong feeling of mutual pull needs to be acted on immediately or at all. But it does mean that attraction is worth paying attention to, not as a problem to manage or a feeling to explain away, as information, as a signal from the parts of yourself that know things your rational mind hasn't fully processed yet. The body knows before the mind admits. The heart knows before the voice says. And the 30 signs we've walked through today are simply the ways those truths show up in the space between two people before either of them has found the words. Pay attention to the space between. It's saying more than you realize. Quick reference: all 30 signs. For those who want a clear summary of everything we've covered: physical signs, signs 1-8, unconscious mirroring of body language and movements, prolonged eye contact with the lingering look afterward, physical proximity and the closeness creep, the involuntary Duchenne smile, the real one, preening and appearance adjustment in your presence, subtle touch and warm reciprocation of touch, nervous fidgeting and self-soothing behaviors, blushing and other involuntary physiological responses, verbal and vocal signs, signs 9-16, a distinct change in their voice when speaking to you, remembering the small details you've mentioned, teasing and playful banter with a warm, exclusive quality, giving your opinions more weight than others' opinions, asking questions that go deeper than social norms require, laughing more readily at your humor than at others, sudden shyness or uncharacteristic quietness around you, responding to your messages quickly and thoughtfully, behavioral pattern signs, signs 17-23, finding reasons and excuses to be around you, subtle jealousy when you talk about others, Supportiveness that goes beyond what friendship typically requires, noticing small changes in your appearance before others do. Protective behaviors, looking out for you without being asked, bringing you into group conversations and including your voice, treating you measurably differently from how they treat everyone else. Deeper psychological signs. Signs 2430. Your name keeps coming up in their conversations with others, including you in future plans using the future tense, sharing things with you they don't usually share with others. Behavioral echoes of having already imagined what if. The energy shift that happens when you enter their space. Missing you specifically when you're not around. The almost moment and the charged quality of things afterward. That's the full picture. 30 signs. A complete map of what mutual attraction looks like when it hasn't yet been spoken out loud. What you do with that map is entirely up to you. But I hope, at the very least, you walk away from this with more clarity than you had when you arrived. More confidence in what you're seeing, more trust in what you're feeling, and maybe, just maybe, a little more courage to say the thing that's been true for a while now. Because life is genuinely short, and some feelings deserve to be said out loud. Thank you for spending this time here today. If this content gave you something to think about, something to recognize, or something you needed to hear, hold on to it. The psychology is real, the feelings are real, and so is the possibility of what could happen when two people finally stop pretending they don't already know.